will point out that the other things we do all relate back to jobs, such as a great educational system, such as a state that is fair and equal. And we will also be looking at the next time we meet at the budget and taxes. We wanted to wait on that because hopefully the House will be able to work on a pass House Bill 2 maybe within the next week or so. Over the last few weeks, we've laid out an aggressive agenda, and this is our opportunity to kind of see how some of the top bills are going. In that regard, it's my honor to introduce Senator Papin. She's our President Pro Tem of the Senate, and she was going to give you an update on the spaceport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. The spaceport bill is on this side, on the Senate side. Representative White bill is over here going into judiciary. My spaceport bill is on the House side waiting to be heard in business and industry. And what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to work out with the Speaker is that if I'm not sure exactly what days those two committees meet on, we would be able to put those bills into those committees on the same day and move those bills forward and then go to the floor and get them up to the governor. This is a bill that we in the southern part of the state are very anxious to have. We feel that it is going to create jobs for us, not only within the area, but in restaurants and in hotels, in the Department of Tourism, that this is going to be an economic engine for the whole state, not just for the southern part, because when we are healthy in one part of the state, then that helps with the health of the whole part of the state. So we're looking forward to doing that and being able to move both these bills very quickly.
Thank you, Senator. And it's important to note that that bill has passed, the House bill passed the House without a vote against it, and the Senate bill passed the Senate without a vote against it. They're both unanimous. That's interesting to note that both of them, the House bill has Representative White, a Republican, as the primary sponsor who worked on it through the interim. He offered that I co-sponsor along with him. I was happy to do it. And of course, Senator Papin's bill has no votes against it. I'm very confident that that will become the law. It was a wonderful work of compromise. And kind of want to say that compromise isn't a bad word. Sometimes we hear about compromise and wonder what that means. In my mind, compromise sounds like the Spanish compromiso, which means two promises. And I think the promises people make when they compromise is to work together. We have really worked on the jobs and economy, and I wanted to talk a bit about that. We have the Work New Mexico Act, and we have Jim Trujillo here, who is sponsoring that. That was the $100 million that was shovel-ready projects ready to go out throughout New Mexico and both fix crumbling infrastructure, number one, and number two, inject that money into the economy and put people to work. That bill is going very well. In fact, it's going better than I had hoped, in that we've had meetings now between the House Republican and Democratic leadership to make sure that that bill is something everyone can support. We've had meetings between the House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, and we've had meetings with the governor on it. And so now what we're trying to do is get that bill in shape to be an expenditure of $123 million, more or less, and these would be things that everybody agrees to. House, Senate, Democrats, Republicans, and executive. The last I heard, they were only a couple of $1 million apart on comparing each other's lists, and that means that votes very well for that. The process then would become that bill would move through the House, go into the Senate, who is originating the complete severance tax package, and then you would have members also taking part with their local ads in that. So that's going very well. The Legislative Jobs Council, Senator Papin and I both have. Senator Papin's bill is currently in the Senate Rules Committee, and the House version of the same bill passed the House on February 15th, and it didn't have a single vote against it either in committee or on the floor. It's very well supported. That will have us targeted during the interim with all of our partners across the board on just looking at how we can do the best to jumpstart our economy and get jobs going. We've also had targeting specific industries like energy, technology, value-added agriculture, and film. And with regard to that, we have a study of state tax incentives. I know those are happening on both sides the House and the Senate. We also have a film production tax credit increase happening on both sides again. And I think that's gotten to a point of great compromise between the House and the Senate and the executive. So that's looking pretty good. You'll note that we have a lot of our members here. I have, of course, have my right-hand guy here in the Majority Floor Leader, Representative Guerra. You're going to see members coming in and out, and that's because we're in committee now, and it's really a very hard, earnest time of work. But I do want, at this time, to introduce Senator Tim Keller, who is the Senate Majority Whip, and also let Senator Pro Tem also visit with you for a brief.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Senator Sanchez isn't here, but I believe he's on his way up. But as you know, he did have a procedure over the weekend, and so I believe that's why he's not here right now at this particular meeting. But he should be here today, and as many of you know, I think Senator Burt had the same procedure during the session last year and was out the same amount of time as Senator Sanchez. So we're looking forward to that. And I might say that my bill sitting in the House Rules, as you all know, right now the Rules Committee is taking confirmations. And so that committee is busy with confirmations, but this jobs bill will be heard rather quickly in Rules, and then we'll get it moving on the Senate side, because this is a very important bill that we have a joint memorial that we have going to try and make sure that we do increase jobs and work, as the Speaker said, that we are able to compromise. I think there's nothing wrong with moving to the middle of the room and getting things done. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Madam President. I'm just going to touch on briefly today basically where we're at in terms of midway through the session in terms of education and social justice. So I think for education, the most important thing to note is, historically we've had a lot of proposals coming from the fourth floor and other places that are focused on third grade reading. And we believe that's important also. However, we feel it's a very narrow focus. And that's why this year Democrats are focusing on literacy across all grades and also issues such as class size and funding. And so we believe we need big solutions to the challenges we have in our education system today. And that's why we have a package of bills designed to address that and also not create some of the challenges that just focusing on third grade would. For example, bottlenecks in different classrooms and challenges in different districts with respect to how they fund the additional coaching. So our process looks really at the following, and each one of these bills is moving through the system. There's the Reading First program by Representative Stewart, that's HB 36. We also have, of course, the Land Grant Permanent Fund bill by Senator Michael Sanchez to fund early childhood development. And we also have reading intervention bills that go through K through 8 that are being proposed by Senators Lopez and Morales. There's also some House members involved in this as well, including the fund balance proposed by the Majority Whip on the House side, Representative Mo Maestas, as well as class size limits by Representative Garcia Richards. Now, as we look at what we do with education, I do want to speak briefly about funding. What we're going to try and do here as a legislature is come together and balance the educational funding that's required with the other items that are on the table, be it Medicaid funding, funding for government services, or corporate tax cuts, single sales factor. These initiatives all have a give and take with respect to education funding. And that's why on the Senate side, at least, the Democrats are really trying to focus on revenue neutral proposals. And I believe that's also true in the House with the notion of closing the single sales factor loophole and additionally compensating for that by closing some other loopholes so that it's revenue neutral. And these are the kind of proposals that we believe are best for New Mexicans. The second piece of this is around social justice, and it's an economic development strategy based on bringing the bottom up in our state. And we want to do that by helping those working families in New Mexico have more dollars in their pocket that they can put into the economy. And that way it helps all of New Mexico across the board, not just a select few. So the relevant bills with respect to that, of course, are minimum wage increases proposed by Representative Garcia and Representative Archuleta, who's here as well. Also, Representative Martinez on his minimum wage increase. And we also have the work sharing program by Representative Lewis, who's here as well, and the increase in working families tax credit, which is Senator Jacob Candelaria carrying that bill. We believe these bills together are going to create broad-based prosperity in New Mexico and avoid some of the challenges we've had in the past with trickle-down tax cut solutions. Lastly, I'll just touch on some other social justice issues that we're fighting for this session. Gender equality in the workforce, that's the Fair Pay for Women Act by Representative Egolf and Senator Lopez. And we also, of course, have some marriage equality initiatives flowing through the system and a slew of voting rights bills proposed by numerous representatives and senators that are going to look at opening up our democracy to even more New Mexicans. And with that, I'll hand it back to, I believe, our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Keller. He's doing a wonderful job, and I really appreciate how he articulates these things. We will be highlighting at the next time we meet on our press conference the budget. But every time we meet, I always like to take an opportunity to introduce you to one of our freshmen. And as you'll see on the House side in the Democratic caucus, we have a really deep bench in that we have really very, very highly qualified freshmen who have come to serve their communities by running for the legislature. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Tomas Salazar. He has a degree. He's a PhD level doctor. He's been a high level college educator. And I told Kiki Saavedra and Lucky for All, I said, we're sending somebody with a PhD in mathematics to House Appropriation and Finance. Recognizing that, they immediately made him a chair of a subcommittee. And I want him to take a few minutes to talk to you about what an experience that's been for him and how that's working. Dr. Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad that I have this opportunity to briefly talk to you a little bit about what I would consider a freshman experience. I certainly will go into some of what it is that the speaker suggested that I speak about. I think by the dynamics that occurred last year with retirements and that occurred among a lot of the legislators in New Mexico, I think the leadership, particularly on the Democratic side as it relates to the House, had a major challenge. The challenge was, how do these new faces enter into the scheme of things relative to the work that we do in the House? And in that particular case, most certainly, let me speak from the perspective of a freshman legislator. I can simply indicate that a couple of things that are exceedingly important is the leadership has not shied away from the fact that assignments to committees have to be made, and they have not shied away from placing freshman legislators in positions of significant authority and responsibility. Let me speak very specifically in regards to that as applies to appropriations and finance. Again, I know that there's going to be a lot of discussion at next press conference relative to that matter. The speaker is right relative to my background, my experience, and so on. But I may just say the following, that in addition to me, there are 4 other freshman legislators that also serve on appropriations and finance. And I can tell you that Representative Doreen Gallegos, Representative Stacy Garcia Richards, Representative Trujillo, and Representative Thompson, all of them serve. And all of them serve with the same challenge that we were given. All of them extremely intelligent, very aggressive, but in a very, very good way. We were told early on by the leadership of Appropriations and Finance, says you're going to find this act of appropriating as a very complex, but understand it's not a chaotic process. And I think, in fact, as I look back and reflect on the work done up to this point, they were exactly right. The one thing that I can say most certainly is the following. In addition to those people in Appropriations Finance that do have leadership positions clearly identified, we have 2 senior Democrat members of that Appropriations Finance, Mr. Rodolfo Martinez, and also Mr. Nick Salazar, that have been very helpful to those of us that fall in the freshman category. You may very well understand also, but because of the significance and long tenure of the following people, that we get the same kind of advice from, and expectations, by the way, from people like Kiki Saavedra, who chairs that committee, Patricia Lundstrom, who is the vice chair of that committee, and deputy chair Lucky Varela. I don't know that I could have asked for better direction, better leadership relative to that. In this particular case, yes, they have also not shied away from giving us responsibilities, and I do chair one of the subcommittees, the subcommittee on commissions and boards. That has been a very, very good experience for me, and so on. So again, for that, I extend thanks not only to the members that lead appropriations and finance from the Democratic side, but also for the speaker and also majority leader that have taken the opportunity to put us in positions where we can make a difference. I hope that what I've shared with you briefly is significant enough for you to understand that the freshman representatives more certainly are willing and very glad to be placed in these positions of great authority. Thank you very much.
So it's important to note that Dr. Tomas Salazar, Representative Salazar, is co-chaired a subcommittee of Appropriation Finance. They create subcommittees on each item of the budget. He's co-chaired it, and meeting with the House Appropriation Finance as they ready House Bill 2 to go to the floor. The subcommittees have voted on their items, and I think so far it's been unanimous votes. For the Senate, where the House Democrats and Republicans come together to vote on each part of the budget in a unanimous fashion, and that bodes very well for that. As I noted, we'll do the budget and tax incentives, but I do want to have a period of time for questions. But I want to let you know, on job creation, Spaceport has been fast-tracked, shovel-ready projects are ready to go, and that's being fast-tracked, and that's a workout, even as we speak, between House, Senate, and the executive, going very well. Education, important to fully fund the programs that invest early, along with interventions as needed, and they're working on that. Driver's licenses, your CEO is looking to find fair solutions to ensure all the public safety concerns, but also look at the human side of the issue. And you notice that there's been bipartisan legislation on the Senate side to work on that, bipartisan legislation on the House side. I had a wonderful meeting with the governor on that. Obviously, there's been movement towards compromise on that, and I think that bodes very well for New Mexico. Health exchange, figuring out how to cover all New Mexicans who are eligible for Medicaid, working on that. Taxation and incentive priorities, a strong business environment with incentives for local hires. You see that being a reoccurring thing that we do. And with regard to public safety, looking at how we keep New Mexico safe, it was huge to have a bipartisan support for closing the gun show loophole on House Bill 77, which passed the House with people voting on both sides. Tremendous compromise and hard work for many hours with our poor, bright-eyed today, but bleary-eyed on Friday, House Judiciary Committee members who did a tremendous amount of hard work on that. And today on the floor, we're going to have a bill from a freshman talking about how to make it safer on DWIs by expanding the use and availability of ignition interlocks to make sure that we keep our streets safe.
Right.
Thank you, Mary.
Well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. And I think you've pretty well covered it. And so we will go to questions from the audience, if there are questions for anyone here.
Any
Yes.
major disappointments, any bills that were some of your top priorities that have been tabled or killed thus far in the session?
So what we do here normally is we table bills. Tabling means that they're placed on the table. That means they can be brought up again if something happens that we were able to work it out. Sometimes the tabling motion is exactly that. It's tabled forever and it will never come back up. But sometimes it's just, let's wait, go in another room and see if we can work that out. I can give you an example in House Labor. We've had some workers' comp bills and they've been tabled, but we're kind of gathering them all together to see if there's some middle ground on workers' comp with regard to it. It's kind of a technical issue, but it's at what point in time do you measure the disability? Is it on maximum improvement, or is upon date of injury. And Representative Laranyaga had a bill, and also Representative Kane had a bill. So I said, let's table them both, ask them to meet and work on it. So there hasn't been any major disappointment that I can see on the House side, because bills that are on the table are subject to further compromise, and we haven't killed any bills. The only way to kill a bill is to go take it to the floor and accept a do not pass. I think there may have been one this year, but that's not very common.
And in the Senate Finance, all the bills that come in with money are tabled without prejudice. And so those are laid on the side until House Bill 2 comes over, and we're able to see where the budget is and how much money is possibly available, and are some of those items in House Bill 2. So they are just laid on the table without prejudice, waiting to build the budget and see if those can be plugged in.
I have a budget question. Has there been any discussion with the governor about employee raises that's in the House budget?
About employee what?
Employee raises, state employee raises?
I have not. I've been in the governor's office 4 times already this session, but I have not discussed that, the raises for employees. I know that we, in LFC, in our budget, we put in a 1% for state employees, and there was also a raise for the state police as well as the motor trans, but I have not had that discussion with the governor.
Yes.
You mentioned being close on driver's licenses. We've seen the compost bill introduced, and we've also seen the Ingalls-Smith bill introduced. When you say compromise, are you referring to a compromise between those two bills, or are you, what are you referring to?
So it's a process, right? And I met with the governor, and I think it was a great meeting. And it was right after we had worked on in House Labor on the first bill that was introduced, which was just a complete repeal. That bill was tabled. She met with me. She goes, I'm willing to look at options. One of the things we looked at was the delayed deportation of children under the Obama administration. I understand she's completely on board with allowing driver's licenses to those children, and some of them, of course, are college age now. And then the question is, where do you work out the middle on that? And I don't know. That's kind of in the Senate at this point. I thought an interesting thing, at least what I'm reading, and a lot of what we learn up here is from you, which is pretty good. But on the Senate side, a lot of it is what I read in the press. But I understand that, for instance, Stuart Ingalls signed both bills, the way I understood it. He signed the compost bill, and he also signed the other bill with John Arthur Smith. So that shows that on the Senate side, there's this work towards some type of working it out. I think that bodes very well. I think the most important thing about that issue is that some of the emotion, where it's kind of a wedge issue, is gone. And now it becomes a technical issue, is how do we make this work between two parties? One party worried about not hurting families in New Mexico that have these blended families, and one party worried about public safety. And of course, both parties sharing concerns on both sides of that issue.
Senator Papin, you mentioned the fights over in the Senate right now. You certainly
yes.
signed on to the Ingle bill.
Yes, I did sign on the Ingle bill, and I signed on the first compost bill. I haven't signed on to a second bill. I'm not sure that it's already gone, but I have met also with the governor on this, and she also seems to be willing to make a compromise on where we're going with this bill, and realizing that we do have a lot of people in this state, as the speaker said, young people who are here, who were born here, or who were brought here as young children and have lived here and have gone all the way through school, and what we need to do that would be right for them. And at the same time, looking at public safety. So it is a family, it is a humanitarian issue, and it's a safety issue.
Do you believe the Ingle bill already represents that compromise, or that there's more work to be done?
I think that probably I think the Ingle bill has some compromise to it, and I think the bill that Senator Campos has, I'm hoping that maybe we can have those two bills somehow or another married and be able to come up with a compromise between those two bills. And I do believe that I believe that the governor possibly will sign whatever bill gets through. It's something that we've argued about a long time. Other states seem to be dealing with this at the present time. And so I think it's something that we need to deal with and hopefully get it moving forward and handle this situation. Yeah.
Yes,
There's been a number of cases this session with bills where Democrats have voted along with Republicans on the side of big corporations and against environmental protection side again today with HB 429. Can you speak to that? And has there been any progress with environmental protection, particularly the water crisis?
yeah, water is a huge issue and environmental protections are also important. I'm not sure I know specifically what HB 429 is. What's the title of that?
I don't have the title off the top of my head,
Private
but
right of action.
A private right of action? So,
It's just
yes.
on the table, that's why I don't.
Oh, okay. So we have the bill sponsor here. Come on up and talk about that briefly. I lose the alphabet soup of knowing all the numbers for bills, as you can imagine. I think we're over 600 on the House side. There'll be about 1,200 pieces of legislation introduced, so it's hard to follow them. But for Democrats, the environment is very important. For all New Mexicans, it's important. And striking that balance between the economy and jobs and making sure we keep New Mexico clean, that's a very important balance for us. Georgine?
Thank you. HB 429 is the private right of action bill, and we were before the Energy Committee this morning. Right now it's on the table, and with that, like Representative or Mr. Speaker said, we're going to work to address some of the concerns that a couple of representatives had and then take it off the table. But I think we heard, at least on the from the Democratic representatives, a lot of support for that bill, and so we're just going to work to address some of those smaller concerns. At least I think they're very workable, and we'll be able to bring it back to Energy Committee and hopefully get a do pass there. Thank you.
I'm going to say something on water. Senator Joseph Cervantes has a bill for $1 million, I think $1,020,000, I'm not sure the total amount, but I know it's it's $100 million, I think, dollars, to be looking at the water situation. As you know, Texas is suing us. They're at the Supreme Court as we speak, and looking at where we're going to go. The water in the Elephant Butte Dam at the present time, there's not enough water to go to the spillway. So are farmers going to be able to have any water this summer, or are they going to have no water? And would the Supreme Court come in and also tell farmers that they can't pump water because they might be reducing the amount of water in the aquifer? So water is a very serious business. It's a very serious business for the whole state, because what happens in the lower Rio Grande is going to affect what happens up north as well. So I think it was Senator Sanchez called it the sleeper issue for the session, and it is a sleeper issue, and but we need to make it become awake and pay attention to it.
Thank you very much.
Just one more. Is there a difference this year in dealing with the governor, and if so, how would you characterize that?
You know, I think that everybody is working well together, and one of those questions is hard to answer because I'm not trying to say we never worked well together before, but I guess what I could say is that we've started earlier in the process of working together. And it's interesting to me that we had what I thought was the toughest election cycle ever in New Mexico with third-party spending, and it got really kind of nasty out there in the campaign. Having seen that firsthand, not as close as Senator Sanchez saw it, but having seen that, I'm surprised by how well everyone is working together. And I think the reason is when you drop the nuke bomb and say, boom, everybody's awful, all this negative stuff, and people come back after having knocked on the doors and saying, I'm not a monster, this is what I believe in. And even when we disagree, it's not disagreeable, it kind of bodes well for people working together. So wedge issues are no longer as wedge as they used to be. And this type of fear that if you vote a certain way, that you will be taken out is no longer, I think, such a big fear, because I think people understand now that if you articulate why you stand for a certain thing, people in New Mexico get it. Even when they don't agree with you, they get it. So I think that bodes very well. I have to say, I've had very good meetings with the governor.
I have
You'll see here that you have the House and Senate Democrats standing shoulder to shoulder every Monday when we visit with you. And it's not, it used to be House fighting the Senate, Senate fighting the House. That's just absolutely disappeared this year. And when you see that kind of working together, I think it becomes infectious. And I have to say, I've enjoyed working with Leader Bratton and the Republican caucus on the House side. We have a very collegial atmosphere on the floor of the House. Even in the most difficult bills, we had the gun loophole bill. I thought it spoke very well of the decorum of the House, the way that debate was handled.
And I would echo that in the Senate as well. I think we work very well with the other side of the aisle. I've worked very well with Stuart Engel ever since I've been up here before I was in this position of leadership. And I feel that the level of animosity that seems to sometimes permeate some of the sessions, I don't feel that permeating this session at all at this point in time. Or with the governor, so I'm hoping that what this means is that we will be focusing on New Mexico. That should